I want you to be thinking about, as you get your question ready, we want this to be interactive. And considering the fact that we've just come through the greatest global experiment and experience with the pandemic, and we're still in it, our organizations have changed. The landscape has changed, and your people are struggling. Your people need support. Your organizations and we in the business community need support. So I'm going to dare you to think differently. As you formulate your questions, be inquisitive. Ask what's possible, because we've done the impossible, right? We've done the impossible, so now we have this brass ring of opportunity. So let's ask these guys, a little bit more, dig a little deeper about what we can do. So Ryan, I'm going to start with you. You and I were discussing ROI, and in your presentation, it comes back to the question, does wellness work, really? And when we talk about these connections, the connections that everyone is looking for, how can our business leaders place a value on those connections? Can you share a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this conversation. So if any of you all want to stick after and talk about ROI, I think it's one worth having. When it comes to wellness, there's no question at all that it should be every organization's top priority. And I think showing the value is also really important. The reason I said there's no ROI, most wellness programs measure their impact through cost avoidance, which is impossible. You actually can't measure something that never happened. And you can't make a guess about something that happened or didn't happen. When it comes to wellness, there's a lot of ways that you can begin to impact, whether it's culture, leadership, turnover, creativity, all of these things. And I work with a lot of organizations on this. What's important to you? What's important to your leadership? Where are you struggling? Retention right now, and I think, has come up. And, how do we really make sure that we do create psychological safety within an organization? How do we build these basic foundational things that actually have very measurable results? But the fact that I lost 5 pounds today doesn't mean that I saved you any money at all tomorrow. So you've got to flip that. And I love your sort of positioning this. How do we change our paradigm a little bit around what wellness is? And I'll tell you, trust, huge. One of the biggest things that impacts people's likelihood to stick with an organization, but their health and well-being. Equity, also huge. Have you had your diversity, equity, inclusion team, your belonging team, whatever, as part of these conversations? If you have a lack of equity within an organization, and equity means a lot of things, right? So we can get into that later. It's going to impact the health and well-being of your people. And so really taking the time to kind of peel this back and really looking at different types of metrics that really do have an impact on your organization is the way to do it. There's no question in my mind. I'd say I'm all for wellness 1,000%. But let's do it right. Let's do it different, and let's actually help people thrive and live their best life. We just haven't done a great job with that. And I'm sure you all, but a lot of organizations haven't.
Yeah, excellent. And I think you touched on the word thrive, right? So we come back to that, that using well-being initiatives as that opportunity to empower your employees and help them to thrive and help your organizations to thrive. And if anybody else wants to comment on it, please, let me know. I don't want to keep the conversation closed to just the one
Everyone
speaker.
talked about wellness. I mean, financial, biggest form of stress for people, finances, as you know, right? If you're not helping them thrive there, more stress, more cortisol, sicker health, it's all tied together.
Okay, David, your CONNECT acronym gave us a taste of how to get started in pushing past accountability 1.0. And I love that easy, actionable strategy. But I have to ask, kind of from the parent in me, do you have a favorite child? Is there one other letter that you feel is kind of next important?
I'm glad you asked.
Didn't see that coming.
Yes, in fact there is. And it would actually be right after the C comes O, which is opening up engagement, which we define in terms of two things. One is trying to really help promote commitment in folks, commitment to the mission, commitment to why you're there, helping them see the connection between what they do and where the organization is going and what it's trying to achieve is very powerful in terms of helping people really feel a part of what's going on and really kind of connect the dots. So commitment is one piece, and the other piece of engagement, as we think about it, is psychological safety, and that word's come up a bit. And psychological safety is one of those things that sounds great. I mean, part of the way I think about that is, do people feel safe to really be and bring their full selves to work? Can you be yourself at work? Do you have the freedom? Do you feel authorized to be able to speak your truth about what you think, about what you see, about anything like that? And in order to do that, in order to create that safety, it actually requires vulnerability, right? So, and vulnerability is inherently uncomfortable. So the paradox here is, to get to safety, you have to be willing to be a little uncomfortable and be vulnerable. And it's especially important for leaders to get this, because unless leaders can do that, people are watching, right? And if the leaders don't feel safe to be themselves and to say, to be vulnerable, to say things like, I don't know the answer, I need your help. Or, yeah, we screwed that up and we've got to do better, right? If leaders can't tell the truth and be vulnerable, it's really hard to expect anyone else to be able to do that. And the thing is, unless you can develop that trust and that safety, later down the road in the Connect model, we have exchanging feedback, which is really important to drive learning in any organization. You have to have feedback. But unless people feel safe, they're not going to be able to really engage in feedback very well, and learning and development and improvement and accountability is all stifled. So my second favorite child is the opening up engagement, because it unlocks so much for individuals and for organizations.
Yeah, and I love that you brought back the leadership modeling, because I think that's so much of a common thread that we're hearing. And actually, it's going to kind of lead us right into, I have a question for Rachel. I had so many places that I could go with your talk, with swiping left or swiping right for organizations. But if we hone in on how employers, how would you recommend that employers kind of bring their authentic selves? How do they promote that? How do they get that out there? Because you feel it inside. If you've got a great culture, you feel it on the inside. But how can they get that word out?
Yeah, and I'll go to Keith's presentation, shouting it from the rooftops. I love that. And it's so true, because I think that if you are being that authentic, why wouldn't you shout it on the rooftops? Why don't you want other people to know? You would want other people to know. So I think a lot of the leaders that I know, and Emily is a great example, using social media as a really strong platform with your connections, getting more connections, but not only talking about you walking the walk and talking the talk internally, it's also about doing that externally. And I'm talking about not within like work circles or networking events. It's like within your personal life too, because your work and your personal are one. We're blending now, right? So if you really truly believe in what you're promoting and what your culture is and what you do within your four walls of your office, you're probably promoting that and boasting that to your friends and your family too. And that's what's really getting that word out and having all of that greatness travel.
Excellent. I want to does anybody in the audience have an example of how you promote your culture? Feel free to raise your hand if there's something that we could all learn from. We'll talk, more after as well. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
It's kind of what Rachel just said. It's been great working at places where there's an extremely robust employee referral program, because it's kind of what she was speaking to. Like, you have people that love where they are and what they're doing, and their managers, and they're telling their friends about it, or former colleagues that they think would be a good fit. That's one way to do it. Love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, when you can run around and tell your friends, like, I'm so happy I found this place, I'm so grateful to be working here, they spread the word to their friends, to their friends, to their friends. That's how you build that external culture that's coming from your internal culture.
Great point. So, Lisa, I'm going to take this to you, and I want to say, I have trust issues, right? So maybe this goes back to the dating app. I don't know. So this is I really pulled out empathetic leadership kind of as a foundation to building this culture of trust, right? But this, I don't think, always comes easily to leaders. If we think about poof management, right, to use Rachel's phrase, not everyone has that innate empathy. So do you have an example maybe of how leaders can model empathy, or just recommendations on how we can build that empathetic leadership quality to build that trust?
That's a good question. I will tell you, this is beyond bizarre. It took me a while to realize I'm holding this mic, but no one can hear me. But it's all related to that back there. So I feel like I'm playing charades. So we have that going on today. So I've been at COCC 18 years. We were an entirely different looking company, business, product line, types of people we hired, employed 18 years ago, even 10 years ago to now. And at the same time, we invest, like I always tell people, I'm like, if our leaders naturally were better at this, you wouldn't have to pay me as much money, because we invest a lot of effort in dollars in great HR people to kind of continue to pull it out, and bring that to what we're doing in our learning channels and our training channels. And so we try to talk less about the bad guy, and we talk more about the good guy. So we see, even people here at COCC, we know the great leaders, we know the people that are forward thinking, being nice, and we know the ones that, are like, leave me alone in code, like, leave me alone, I'm gonna do my job. And so we try to spend more time elevating up the people that are doing a great job at it. And we just keep doing it, and we don't give up. Like, we could easily give up and go, oh my gosh, so-and-so is going to always be so-and-so, but we just keep it going. Like, even this today, when I was walking out this afternoon, I had asked our training team, how did everything go with one of our new DE&I vendors today that we did some training? And their response was, the employee session was fantastic. There was so much dialogue. And the managers were they sucked. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And so I'm like, well, we have to shape it with them. And naturally, people are competitive. So my response is, the next time we have the manager one next week, tell the managers that signed up, the managers last week sucked. So, like, get them to want to give. So for us, it's like, we can't stop showing up where we see the good. And because we all can go in the negative, but if we keep focusing on the good, it will eventually give. So that's my response to that. Yes. And I have trust issues as well. So we all have trust issues.
Great.
I don't trust this mic.
Thank you.
I'll take that.
Thank you. And this is another great segue, because I think of things like mental health. When you say that managers sometimes it doesn't come naturally. And when we talk about mental health in the workplace or financial well-being in the workplace, my question to you, Keith, personal finance, isn't it kind of personal, right? So the same thing, we're asking managers and leaders to maybe step your toe over a line that in the past, we didn't have to do that. But because of the blurring of work and home and family life and professional life, now we're saying, yeah, we're going to talk about finances. So my question is, what's the business value of getting personal and talking about personal finances? How do we look at that?
And so I've had like 10 minutes to try to figure out which direction you're going to go. I don't know if anybody saw, I actually glanced over Sarah's shoulder to see what she's going to ask. It is amazing. And I've probably talked to, it has to be easily 2,000 people one-on-one. It's amazing how quickly the walls just break down when you're behind closed doors and people feel like, I'm a complete stranger, right? But in their eyes, I'm the two C's. I am confidential and, in a way, complimentary. I'm not asking for a check at the end, right? It's kind of all-inclusive with our service model. Once they hear those two C's, it's kind of a therapy session. We feel like we can't do our job unless we know everybody's full picture, right? How can we advise on just half the picture? We can't do our job effectively. Now, the other thing that I always find really interesting is, for the vast majority of people we talk to, it is the first and probably the only financial advice they'll ever receive, right? Even just a 30-minute conversation for the vast majority of the workforce could be exactly what they need to just get put on the right track to start making the right decisions. It's so common that we don't know what we don't know. And we just need somebody who's unbiased. I think we've all probably heard that word fiduciary, right? That we can bounce those questions off of. I think I think that covers it.
Yeah, and it's easy to put it off, right? Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Absolutely.
So we don't always take that time and having the employer think of what you're doing for your employees. By bringing that in and making that convenient and accessible, you're giving them that open door of opportunity. So I love that. Other questions? You guys have had a little time now, a little time to think. Oh, we got one in the back. Go ahead.
Susie. Hi, Susie Craig. I work for Mental Health Connecticut, so I'm a mental health organization. I'm really happy to hear this theme of leadership coming up and like how from leaders to managers, how do you support your employees? Since we're a mental health organization, we have to, in the mental health field, we got to kind of kill it, right? We have to like for our employees, we really have to go above and beyond to support them. And I'm thankful enough to have a CEO that is amazing. He goes to every orientation. He picks up the phone with every employee. He's just really amazing. And he actually had someone in orientation tell him she came from another agency and she'd been there for like 6 years, had never met the CEO. The CEO never smiled. He never cracked jokes. She didn't know his personality. So we take, this is a really long-winded question, sorry. we start from from the job description, like all the way through the process about how do our values and how do we show up and like how does leadership support the human in the organization, right? What are other points in the process that you've seen where companies are doing that really well, where employees feel supported in every piece of that process? Like, I think it was Rachel in the first presentation mentioned that 6-month window. That's a really short amount of time if you think about it to make sure someone doesn't leave. So I'm just curious to hear about other points.
So beyond the first impression, what else can they be doing?
Yeah, and I'll start out. At risk of sounding redundant, just having an external resource that for our clients that their employees can call on to bounce those questions off of. You can always point to corporate politics, dynamics, not wanting to overshare with your employees for why those same questions aren't being asked at the water cooler or to their neighbor at their cube, right? So I think having that independence, again, fiduciary for us in our line of business is huge.
Yeah, I'll tack on and kind of what you were saying along the lines of your CEO really caring. I think that personal touch means so much. And I know a lot of us are over Zoom, a lot of us are virtual these days, and it's harder. But we also here have established like a buddy program when new hires come on so that somebody has somebody else that is maybe going through the same thing or can help guide them in some way, shape, or form. But like a lot of recognition and just kind of like acknowledgement, appreciation segments as you go through those first crucial months of your employment and really showing that, hey, we're so happy you're here. We're so happy to see your value. We really care that you're a person, you're a human. You're not just a worker bee, right? And I think that's so important to just be able to have leadership make time to have those one-on-ones instead of just saying, oh my God, they've already been through, and how easy is that to happen? Like they've been through their first 2 weeks. I haven't even talked to the person. You got to make time.
Even easier when they're remote.
Yeah, exactly. Forget about it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to totally build on what you just shared, Rachel. So I would say that another piece that thing that leaders can do is be very deliberate in when they're onboarding someone about really taking the time to lay down expectations for their relationship. Like, what do you need from me as your supervisor to support you? And to anticipate there might be times when you have to give me feedback or I have to give you feedback. How should we do that together in a way that's gonna support you? So to really be, we call this in coaching designing the relationship. So I think that this can be done more in organizations where if you take the time to sort of try to lay that foundation and again to set clear expectations and open up that safety and engagement and trust in the beginning, that you're getting off to a good, you're setting the relationship off on a good kind of footing and in a good direction.
I'll add a couple pennies to that one. What I do when I work with groups is to map out the entire employee experience. It's starting with the website. That's the first impression that they have with you. And so you've got some opportunities to only get it right once. First interview, first time, first day on the job. There's things that if you mess up can be detrimental and you might even lose them faster than the 6 months. And then there's ongoing things. It's feedback, other types of things that'll just be ongoing, the norms, the culture, the values of the organization that are going to be reinforced. But if you can map out every sort of touch point that employee has, and then try to weave in what you feel like is important to communicate with them, that goes a really long way. And it starts with the website, about the organization, it starts with communication, how you talk about it in your newsletter, how the CEO shows up. All of those things matter. Performance reviews, how you do those, but really how they leave. Are you collecting that data through exit interviews, things like that? I mean, every single one of those interactions has an impact on that individual. And even if they go, you want them to speak favorably about the organization, right? Because that also goes a long way. So how do you ensure that that sort of reputational capital sort of carries on beyond their time with you?
So you guys have all touched on something. So I had read about when we talk about the employee experience, there are these opportunities for moments of truth. So your job is to try to increase these moments of truth. So all of these positive opportunities and positive experiences add up, and that can impact both whether you retain employees and whether you're attracting them in terms of that conversation. Other questions?
My question is kind of to, I think, Lisa and maybe Ryan, but, I just want to know, like, and from other business leaders in the room, like, how are you all, like, rolling from one crisis to another, trying to make change and support kind of like in real time, right? Like, COVID seems like, all right, I mean, that, okay,
Yeah.
but now we've got the inflation, right? Like, I think I just spent $80 on Uber Eats for 4 cheeseburgers.
Right.
And I usually don't pay attention to these things, but so it's getting a little egregious. It's exhausting. But then, now we just have like the Roe v. Wade thing, so you've got other things now just percolating. But are you able to adjust and implement programs and do things more quickly than you were before? Because before we're just like year to year, medical health trends. Like, maybe when they're supposed to say talk about it in April, decide in June, July, maybe we'll do one or two things. But now that like things are really piling on, how are you?
I mean, I think the whole workplace has changed. And I think it's for a lot of reasons. I think people were home, they were isolated, people are looking for connection for different things. I even sometimes do like the little thing in the shower, like, wow, if I didn't spend the last 2 years on COVID, what would we be working on the last 2 years? What new programs, what would our workspace look like? But I do think, and so like for us, and kind of the start of what I mentioned before, like I don't think I should not have the exact same people strategy right now in 22 into 23 and 24 because it is shifting so much. I spent my 18 years at COCC kind of having a 3-year, like, this is what we're gonna be focused on the next 3 years. And so much is changing. The people that are coming in, what they want, what they're looking for has changed. So to me, like, we have to be far more agile. Like, we've redefined some of our structure because like before the pandemic, what safety was to us was someone would come by and say, the carpet tile is loose on the stairwell, right? Mm-hmm. Now safety is, this person next to me, I'm uncomfortable, right? They seem sick. What are you guys doing about COVID? And then inflation, right? We've gotten eaten up of, what are we doing for, we thought our 4.5 average merit increase was gonna be awesome. People are like, are you kidding me? So it's constant. So I don't even, right now I could sit here and say, I think we need to be focused on these next 3 things, but I think it's going to shift so dramatically. The Roe v. Wade, right? So, that's going to come into our workplace. We're going to see it on our stairwell boards. Someone's going to put something there, and it's going to be polarizing. We were lucky that 95% of our staff was home during George Floyd. We didn't have to deal with the inappropriate comments on the whiteboards, but we'll have it. And so it's being ready for it, not being scared of it, and people not wanting to make a big deal. Like, we have some departments that are very dramatic. Did you see the thing on the whiteboard? Oh yes, you've already taken care of it. Just trying to minimize, trying to move by things so it doesn't become so polarizing. But those are the things that we have to be prepared for. And so I've just tried to stay of this mindset that we have to be ready for what's next. We have to be ready where the workforce is going to take us because it is evolving so quickly, so much faster than where we were. Ryan, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, I would agree. I would just say, I mean, a couple things it goes back to. I mean, obviously, the trust piece is huge, but I would ask a lot of questions. I mean, I've worked with some organizations; they specifically have pandemic response plans, response plans that they recognize that people are stressed beyond belief, that burnout is a real thing, that mental health is a top priority, and so yeah, I mean, even our program, I'm seeing more rollouts off cycle, outside of open enrollment. With people and asking, I mean, I have every week, what do you all need? Because I think what employees need today is different today than it was last week, last month, last year. It'll be different next week, next year. Like it's changing. And the types of support and programs that people need is also evolving. And looking at your benefits, are they working? Do the benefits that you have, are people using your EAPs? Are they using your wellness programs? Are they leveraging what you already have in place? And if they're not, then maybe it's a good time to redirect some funds to other types of things that are going to be a lot more beneficial. So I would say I'd be evaluating all of that and moving quick to offer things that actually are more meaningful or that can provide more support than what you don't have.
Hi, Wally Harper, Gaylord Hospital. Thanks for having us here. Lisa, a little bit follow up on that whiteboard process. Can you describe a little bit more about what that is and how that works?
Oh, I was referring to what you have whiteboards in the stairwell where people write things, and it's the place in our building that has always inappropriate things. It's the only, aside from the bathrooms, it's the only place we don't have cameras. So when I was talking about the whiteboards, I should have been a little bit more descriptive. It's areas where the intention was to write fun things, not political things. And we want to have a space where employees can be free, but we're constantly, these things are now weaving into the workplace where they didn't weave in at the rate that they are today. So my whole view is it doesn't matter when anyone walks in, my goal is to not act like it's thrown me off. Like, oh, I was ready for that. Even though in my mind, I'm like, what the, right? But we have to be ready for it. We have to minimize making larger deals out of some of these things. And just being ready for it. The workforce is so different. It is so different than where it was. And I see it continuing to evolve. So the whiteboard thing is just, we need cameras. We need more cameras. But, it's.
Does it tell you things that you might know that you'd want to know about what your workforce is thinking?
It's interesting. We have had things where it's like, no, we need to be more present there. But we're constantly surveying our employees. There's probably not a month that goes by that we're not asking questions, trying to find places where people can give us feedback. But to your point, the whiteboard sometimes can give us things where people are a little upset. And it's an area where people feel like they can share something without someone knowing.
And with the camera, you wouldn't get that.
Correct. With the camera, we wouldn't get it.
What are you using for survey follow-up?
So, well, we do. So we invest in Great Places to Work is our annual climate study. We do top workplaces, as well. We use 15.5 for our employee collaboration tool. I don't know how familiar you guys are with 15.5, but it was probably one of the best things that we green-lighted during the pandemic. It's a weekly check-in platform that allows us to ask questions in the moment. So we're constantly, having follow-ups in many different channels, not to mention onboarding surveys and experience surveys and things like that.
Sorry to be a hog of the questions, but do you ever get survey fatigue from people? Do they respond to these things readily?
Right now, we're going to be rolling out top workplaces next week, and I'm pretty convinced we're going to have the lowest response rate ever because the workforce seems to be burnt out, a little disengaged. We did our full callback to our employees. Well, I shouldn't say full callback because we have a growing number of remote workers, but everybody's about 35 days into being back in the hybrid work schedule. So it's a weird time. People are shifting in. I mean, I just had an employee tell me today, I come in once a week and it took me a while to find shoes. I'm like, okay, that's weird. But, it was hard for her to find shoes today. So, apparently it is, right? And as much as I want to be like, you haven't left the house, but I know I can't say that. But those are those things. So I'm more worried now than ever that we've got this little bit of disengagement, people just giving what they can. Hopefully, more sunshine will help them. It's just going to take time. It's a shift, big shift.
It's a follow back up with that. Amy Galvin from HAI Group about engagement. We actually just recently did the top workplaces and just got our results back, and so we're still looking through the results. And it's very interesting. The results, people that are in the office 100% are highly engaged. People that are home 100%, highly highly disengaged. And the interesting thing is people in the middle, it's more on the disengagement side. But yet, the comments, we're still going through them, but the comments said, please give us more remote work, please make us go back all the time. So I find that very interesting. It's such a difference. So more of a question probably for David. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, yes, exactly. Is there a whiteboard? I think that's that's a challenge, right? To sort of unpack that, and I think it might be interesting to sort of convene some focus groups to actually try to understand people's what might be behind that data. I mean, that's a lot of times what we do is we'll start with survey data and then we'll convene interviews and focus groups afterwards to try to help unpack it and understand it. So just trying to really get behind like what are people's experiences about so that that will hopefully get you closer to what seems to be like a paradoxical or conflictual kind of set of results. Yeah, sure.
I just have a quick question. So a lot of people here are talking about the remote workplace and it seems like a higher level employee base. So I work in manufacturing. I have a very low skilled workforce. We were in office the whole time. There was no, we were required to work. And I find that, the employees struggled through, but luckily they mostly all stayed on and we haven't really experienced a lot of the turnover. Again, I think it has to do with the base and pay and the type of employee we're talking about. But I want to get at a place where we can engage them more and sort of talk to them. And I have very, very multicultural employees, probably 8 different languages in the workplace. And so like surveys and that kind of thing hasn't worked for us. I've tried it in a couple different aspects since I've been there, and I've only been there 2 years now. So I'm just wondering what other ideas, or have you guys, anybody else here also, had any experience or what has worked for this situation?
I think of like personalized coaching where like.
Yeah, I'll just add because we have we had about 65 people that were required to come into our buildings, being a critical workforce. Most of them, I want to say a little bit more entry level. Some of our data center folks, and I was just in that building yesterday doing a roundtable, and they do actually. I feel like their answers are so much more genuine. I would just keep it very basic. I would have, and I don't mean to keep going back to a whiteboard, but I would just ask them like, get them to put down something that is easy for them to answer in the lunchroom. Whiteboard of, what are the 2 things if we could make things better for you this year? What are they? Like, just have them fill it out. Put some colorful markers out there and see if you could get some engagement on something so simple. Like they're going probably to the break room for something to eat or a cup of coffee, and ask a very basic question that you think they all, especially if you have multi languages, that you think they all can understand. Like what's the most important thing that we keep doing? Like I just said to a couple people in our company, because we have another survey coming out. I'm like, the 3 areas, like, what do you want us to continue doing? What do you want us to start doing? And what should we stop that's like really annoying you? Like just try to bring it in very basic ways. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah.
Make it human.
Yes.
Make it very.
Yeah, and I would agree. And I was going to say too, in your situation, it might be that people don't feel that safety that we talked about to come out and be able to say, here's what I think, this is my opinion, answer these questions. So I think being able to create that psychological safe space, and how you do that, it's hard, right? Especially if it's not there already, to be transparent, and as a leader and as your leadership become vulnerable themselves first to show that, and maybe they can share their opinions. What do they think? What are they struggling with, to kind of break down some of those walls? Because I think that's probably a big part of it too.
Yeah, I agree. Somebody said something like roundtable or quick interviews. That might be an easier way to engage some of them, especially because there's language issues and barriers, so that they're comfortable with someone they can trust.
Yeah, I think it's boots on the ground in two ways. Actually, just last week, I spent the day at one of our clients who the vast majority of their workforce is from Eastern Asia. English is their second language. And I got from every single person 1 of 2 questions. Am I getting the full match? Nobody was. Nobody understood it. And that was huge. Or can I get my money? Right? 2 opposite ends of the spectrum, but both you can draw some conclusions from. And the other thing that we find really valuable in a situation like that is speaking to that long tenured person, right? Speaking to somebody who's been around, in the warehouse for a while, who, a lot of the employees trust, even look up to, who can be privy to those conversations that you wouldn't necessarily from where you sit.
So I think we have to, I'm getting the hook. So we want to allow time for everyone to, mingle and network and have a chance to ask some more questions. So I think we're going to adjourn back out to our lobby. And I apologize. I think we had one question. So make sure you ask these guys.
Yeah, I just would
thank
love
you.
to give one more round of applause for an awesome kickoff.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.